We'll start this build out by marking the location for the booms. I'm using a tape measure, but any measuring device can be used. You're going to want to measure out between 3.5 and 4 inches from the center of the center wing. That is the thickest part of the wing. Do this at both the bottom and about 3/4 of the way up the wing to be sure it's straight. Do this on both the front and the back side of the wing. Now we'll move on to gluing the fuselage together. Glue both the back and the front using a fair amount of adhesive, enough to coat both sides. Once coated, take the other side, press these together and move them around to be sure both sides are coated. You can wipe it with your finger just to be sure all surfaces are coated. Then separate them, put them to the side and let them dry, and then we'll press them back together in about 10 minutes. While the fuselage is drying, we can glue the wings together. Again, put a fair amount of adhesive, enough adhesive on the wings to be sure that both surfaces are coated. You can wipe it with your finger like I'm doing here if you like. Once you're sure that there's enough glue to coat both sides, press the wings together, work it around, then pull them apart. If you need to add a little bit more adhesive to one side, feel free to do so. More is better than not enough. When doing the aileron sections, only glue the front part, as the aileron section will need to be moved freely. Again, I'm wiping it with my finger. Be sure again that you have plenty of adhesive to coat both sides. Once coated, we'll leave this to dry for about 10 minutes and then we'll press it back together. After about 10 to 15 minutes, the adhesive on the wing should be pretty much dry, but still aggressively tacky to itself. From here, align the front of the wings, then bring the back in, pressing together very firmly to be sure the glue bonds. This glue is a contact adhesive, and thus it should tack up and bond fairly significantly. However, full bond will be achieved overnight. We can now do the exact same thing to the fuselage. Again, be careful to line it up properly. Then, with both halves aligned, use a good amount of force and press it together. It should hold fairly securely. However, full cure will be reached with drying overnight. Now we'll spar our wing. Use a tape measure or other measuring device to measure the center of the rod and then cut it in half. This is 24 inches long. Then, using a straight edge and placing it across the wing approximately 1 inch back from the center of the leading edge, take a knife and strike down the wing approximately 1 inch deep into the wing. You don't want to cut all the way through. You only want to cut just a little bit deeper than the spars are thick. Once you've finished your cut, embed glue into the slot. Then embed the spar. The spar will be approximately 2 inches short of the wing length on each side. Now, I recommend flexing the rod and then pressing it in as a bend, but you can also simply just press it straight in like I'm showing here. Whatever you do, do not run your fingers down the fiberglass spar, or it will leave fibers in your fingers and an itch you will never forget. Repeat this procedure on the opposite side of the wing so that the spar on the top and the bottom align properly. Again, do not cut all the way through the wing, only about 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch deep. The remaining spar will be cut into 6 sections, 2 12-inch sections, and then 4 6-inch sections. The long section goes along the bottom of the fuselage, the short goes along the top. These keep the fuselage from breaking in the event of a crash. Use a pen or marker and mark where these rods both start and stop along the fuselage. Then, using a straight edge and with a plug installed so that you get a good, nice cut, cut approximately 1/8 of an inch deep into the fuselage between the 2 marks. This is where you will embed your spar. Once cut, squeeze a little glue into the slot and then proceed to embed your spar. Repeat this procedure on the other side of the fuselage so that the spars align. Now we'll install the booms. Add a good amount of glue down the lines that you made in the beginning of the video where the booms will be installed. Do this on both the top and the bottom of the wing. Then, noting the curve of the boom matches the top of the wing, install the boom, press together, and then wipe down the foam with your finger to make sure it is bonded. Do this to both sides of the wing. Then remove the boom and let it set for about 10 minutes so the contact adhesive can cure. Once the glue is partially cured, slide the booms back into place, but do not press them tight as we need to make sure they are aligned. Use a tape measure or other measuring device and verify the distance between the booms in the front and the back of the aircraft is the same. If not, straighten out the booms before you press them tight. Once you're verified that they are aligned properly, then put an ample amount of pressure to bond the glue up for good. Now we can glue in the elevator assembly. Add a good amount of glue to both the top and bottom portions of the slots in the rear of the booms. Then take the tail and align it to center, slide it in place, then press the ends together to be sure there's a good amount of glue on the tail assembly. Lift up the back of the foam and verify that there's enough glue there. If it doesn't seem to be enough, simply add a little bit more just to be sure you've got a good bond. Now we can cut the hinge for the elevator. Remove one flute out of the area for the elevator by cutting 2 parallel lines along one of the slots. Then simply remove this piece of plastic, but do not cut all the way through the coroplast. You only want to cut out one side of the slot. Then, if you need to, use a knife and trim out all the jagged edges to make sure the elevator has a free range of travel. You'll see that I already have spars installed in the booms here. Before you install these spars in the booms, be sure that the tail is level and even with the bottom of the wing. If it is not, adjust the booms so that the tail and wing are level. The motor mount is simply glued to the back of the fuselage. Add an ample amount of glue to the one side of the wooden mount. Then simply press it to the flat spot on the back of the fuselage. Work it around good to be sure both surfaces are covered with glue. Then remove it and put it to the side to allow it to cure. In 10 minutes, we'll stick it back on. After about 10 minutes, simply press the motor mount plate back onto the back of the fuselage and it should stick fairly solidly. You'll want this to dry overnight before powering up a motor on it. The motor is mounted to this plate via the X mount, which is common with most motors. I'm using the servo screws that came with the servos in the airplane because they're not useful for much of anything. However, if your servos didn't come with screws, simple number 2 size wood screws, 1/2 inch long, will be sufficient to attach the motor to the mounting plate. You'll want to get these fairly snug, but don't strip the wood out. If you want, you can bed a little bit of glue in the slots to make sure that the screws don't back out. Now we'll dry fit the fuselage to the wing. Be sure that the fuselage is centered and straight, and then take a pen or marker and draw lines down the wing along the sides of the fuselage on both the top and the bottom of the aircraft. Now we'll glue the fuselage in place by adding a good amount of glue to the center section of the wing in between the 2 lines. Again, add a lot of glue here. Don't go light on the glue because this is the only thing that keeps the fuselage attached to the aircraft. Once you've got a good amount of glue embedded, open up the fuselage, slide it in, align it, then press down tight. Once done, pull the fuselage away and let dry for 10 to 15 minutes, then reinstall and press together. To install the Aileron servos, simply use the servo as a jig and draw a line around the servo. Then take a knife and cut out this section all the way through the wing. Then push it out the bottom. To install the servo, add a little bit of glue and press in place. I highly recommend cutting about a 1/16 of an inch inside your lines when cutting the servo bay out to be sure that there's a good bit of pressure on the foam holding the servo in place. Using the control horn as a jig, press down into the foam to make 2 marks. Then use a knife to punch through the foam out the bottom. Then add a little bit of glue to your control horn and then install one of the slide lock plates and move it backwards. Then add a little bit more glue to the bottom tines and then press it through the foam so the tines stick out the other side. Add a little bit of glue again to the back side, then slide the second locking plate over the tines, press down firmly, then slide the plate back to lock the aileron control horn in place. The linkage is made up of 2 clevises and a piece of threaded rod. Thread a piece of the threaded rod into one of the clevises partially, then install it on the servo horn. Then, using the other clevis and the servo or control horn as a guide, cut off a section of the threaded rod so that it is the appropriate length such that you can get about 6 to 7 full turns of the clevis and achieve the proper length. The elevator control horn and linkage are similar to that used on the ailerons. Using the linkage assembly as a guide, press the screws for the control horn into the coroplast to make a mark. Then use a piece of threaded rod, a knife, or a drill bit to puncture 2 holes in the coroplast. Then place the control horn back over top, the screws down inside, and then use the square locking plate to screw into. Tighten this down snug, but try not to crush the coroplast flutes in the elevator assembly. The elevator linkage is made the same way that the aileron linkage was made, by cutting a piece of the threaded rod to the proper length and attaching a clevis to each end. You'll note that the threaded rod is only about 1 inch long for this section, as the servo is very close to the hinge assembly. The final part of this build is installing the fuselage center plug. Use your electronics as a guide to know where you're going to place them and make the cuts out of this plug. Use a pen to mark where you want your video transmitter and your batteries to go, as well as things such as power filters and cameras if you'll be installing them. Now, I find the perfect battery size for this airplane is a 1300 3-cell, but a 1000 milliamp hour 4-cell is excellent for those people who like high power setups. You'll want to set the weight such that the airplane balances on the spar you previously installed. Now, take a knife and cut out the sections where you traced out so that your battery and your electronics will fit inside. Then, add a good amount of glue to the plug and then drop it down inside the fuselage. I recommend spreading the fuselage out with your fingers to make sure the glue doesn't scrape off down the side and not get embedded in the creases in the bottom. One hint here is once you have the plug installed, run a little bit of glue around the edges to be sure that this is installed solidly, as this will tend to crack in a very hard crash if it's not glued in. The rest of the electronics parts I leave up to you. A good place to mount the receiver is in the fuselage rear underneath the speed control underneath the aircraft. I am placing my video transmitter, of course, here inside the fuselage. And that's all there is to it. The plane is built and ready to fly. Now go out, enjoy, and do some obstacle dodging. I'm Ivy Crazy, and thanks for building.